Okay, so today I just want to read you an excerpt from my novel Illicit Love. It's not from the first chapter, it's from about 3 or 4 chapters in, so I'll just read a little bit of it to you. Edward had been waiting 10 minutes when he saw her. She was simply and elegantly dressed, her appearance nothing like that of a courtesan. The long dark navy pelisse she wore was to keep her warm in the chill early March winds. Spring was still as yet unbroken. The demure garment hung to her ankles with double-breasted buttons across her chest, and an upturned fox fur collar framed her beautiful neck and face. Her hands were within a matching fox fur muff at her waist, and the dark navy hat sitting high on her ebony hair was decorated with jay's feathers that swept up from the brim above her left ear, and a narrow navy veil woven in a fine net was drawn down over her eyes and nose. His hands curled into fists inside the pockets of his thick many-caped greatcoat as he watched her, waiting for her to notice him. She had thought to hide herself, he guessed, but he would know the curve of her jaw, that mouth, the column of her neck, anywhere, even within a crowd. He had committed it to memory 6 times in recent weeks, and lain awake night after night recalling every detail. She looked over her shoulder, glancing back up the street as if she half expected to be followed. Then she looked at the traffic in the road, waiting until it was clear before she crossed the park gates. She had still not seen him. Within her muff he imagined her hands clasped together, her thumbs circling one another. He had seen a tendency to fiddle when she stood at Gainsborough's back. She was forever twisting and turning her fan, never comfortable nor secure. The other courtesans he had seen in London were women of excessive confidence, bold, never meek and maidenly in their manner, as Ellen always seemed. With Ellen he could not even lay her lack of confidence at the door of her age. She was older than him, and yet her nervous behaviour made her seem 6 years younger. She was on the path some distance before him now, her short, quick stride slicing at the skirt of her pelisse. Her gaze was on the pavement ahead of her, oblivious to the man who passed her and looked back, as nearly every man did, even with her beauty covered by a veil. She looked up. The moment she saw him, he could tell she had not thought he would come. It was in the sudden drop of tenseness in her shoulders, and the smile opening her mouth as if she would speak and acknowledge him from afar. But such an outburst would be folly, even though he had come as asked without acquaintance or equipage. Someone may know him. Her mouth closed on the exclamation as she increased her pace, weaving through people walking the other way. He silently cursed every man who looked at her twice. But then she was clearly a woman of standing, walking alone. The conclusion was obvious. A protective wave of masculine hormones ran through his blood, an instinctive need to defend his territory. Angry at himself, he turned to walk through the gates of the park, sensing her follow. Fool, she isn't yours. She was Gainsborough's, and when he spoke to her he must not forget it. He'd walked nearly 200 yards before she drew alongside, and when she spoke her voice was breathless, but full of joy. He'd not heard in it before. You came. I didn't think you would. A vice-like grip contracted tightly about his heart as his senses were filled with the scent of her, the sound of her. God, he had this bad. You had no idea to be any doubt. My feelings are unchanged, Ellen. His voice was harsher than he intended, in response to the need and longing ripping through his chest. You are angry, though. He chased away the pleasure from her voice. No, he answered, smiling, looking sideways at her, just desperate to be alone with you. He ached to reach for her hand, but made no move to touch her, following her lead. It was hardly the fashionable hour, and a less frequented park, so they would be unlikely to meet anyone he knew, but even so, he was aware of her concern for caution. She held slightly aside from him while they walked along a path on the edge of the open grass. To their left was a dense shrubbery of evergreens. Ahead of them, other couples laughed in flirtatious conversation. I thought because you have stopped coming to Madame's, her words trailed off. Because I cannot bear to watch you with him, that's why. I was beginning to wonder if you had changed your mind. Stopping suddenly, she turned and met his gaze for a moment before looking away to watch a couple further on, as though unable to accept his observation. This has been the first opportunity. He's gone for several days. She started walking again, a little ahead of him, her eyes fixed on the distance where the winter where the white winter sky met the horizon of the city's park. Yet he felt the meaning of her statement hanging in the air between them. He began walking too. She was so uncertain of herself, he realised, she didn't even dare presume he would wish to see her more than once, despite the fact he had only a moment ago declared his feelings were unchanged. He followed her, a step behind, his open hand hovering at her back, not touching, as if to protect her from what the world had thrust upon such slim and unsubstantial shoulders. That living this life was not her choice couldn't be in doubt. Okay, thank you for listening to my little excerpt of my novel Illicit Love. It is available on Amazon, and the first chapter will be on Amazon for you to be able to look inside and have a read of that too. If you read it, I hope you enjoy it, and if you enjoy it, then please put a review on Amazon or Goodreads. I'd really appreciate that. Thank you. Oh, and this is my dog Pepper, who featured in the video as well. Bye.